Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Daily AI Show Live. Today is Friday, December 19th, 2025. And with me today are Beth, Andy, and I'm Brian. We appreciate y'all being here. Hey, Cisco. Hey, Greg, already in the chat. Appreciate y'all saying good morning this morning, or for Cisco, maybe not so much morning. But appreciate y'all being here nonetheless and being part of the conversations. We always say the folks that are in our live chat are, the often unseen but very very important extra co-host on this show. So if that's something that you're available during the 10 a.m Eastern weekday hour, to say that specifically, that's when we're live on this show, if you happen to be watching or listening to us at another time. But if you are available during that 10 a.m hour, then hey, you can go to LinkedIn, but we would suggest going over to YouTube and being part of our chat there, because again, we rely on those comments all the time. We bring them into the conversations whenever we can, but we're always reading them and sometimes just commenting back in that chat. So a great way to be interactive with the show if you like. Okay, so as far as today goes, guys, I am, for one, there it goes. I was like, for one, I'm trying to get the bottom of my screen to disappear because StreamYard was showing me a bunch of settings, but that's gone now. So now we can move on to the actual show stuff. So I was out of the show yesterday, so I didn't get to hear the news and things like that. But you guys can tell me if you've already covered some of this. But for me, I was the most impressed with the Neuron, who puts out a newsletter, and it's one of the 7 to 8 newsletters I probably peruse. I can't say I read every word of every one of them every day, but they're definitely in my stack of AI news. And they did a great job of breaking down in this article what Sam Altman talked about on his blog with Alex Kantrowitz, who I don't know. I don't recognize him. Do we know who he is off the top? This is the Big Technology Podcast. Not familiar
I
with
would
the
say
name.
Karl probably knows, but this is my first encounter as well.
Okay, well that's good to know, because sometimes like you guys definitely are like, oh no, that person, whatever, and it's somebody I'm meeting you for the first time. So anyway,
You don't know Alex.
I
Yeah,
know,
no,
right?
we don't
Well, it
either.
happens a lot on this show, so that's why I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. But anyway, this is the Big Technology Podcast, and Sam Altman had, looks to be right about a 1 hour conversation, during which he covered quite a lot just based on the neurons breakdown of it. Everything from memory, and this quote is, "Memory is in the GPT-2 era." And I'm sure you guys might have more to add to this, so I don't want to go through all of it, but that's the one I want to focus on just as my first news story, is this idea of memory being the GPT-2 era. And the reason for that is because this is something we've actually been talking about quite a bit on the show, is what do we actually want from memory? Do we want pulse, like we talked about earlier in the week, and saying that Karl has that. I don't know about you guys, but I have noticed, and then Ali on TikTok also said this. Like, I think it was Ali. Dang, now I might be wrong on that. Somebody was saying on TikTok, and they were like, hey, ChatGPT is acting a little quirky, as if like sort of there's been this like injection of these personalities that, yes, you've been able to pick personalities on ChatGPT, but it's funny. I was thinking it and hadn't verbalized that I was feeling that way with ChatGPT, and then she put out this. I don't think it was Ali, but somebody put out this TikTok, and they're like, "Have y'all noticed this?" And she's like, "It's using words that I would use, but I don't think I've written that way to ChatGPT." And I thought, "Oh, geez, I've kind of seen that too." By the way, I've also seen that sort of on a Gemini. Now, maybe that's sort of memory, maybe that's not, but obviously, it's pulling in contextual little tidbits, little snippets from past conversations and determining what kind of persona it should have in its interactions with me, above and beyond maybe where the system prompting is. And that's part of memory, right? That's not like all inclusive memory, but that's part of perfect memory. So this is what the Neuron says about it. He says Sam makes an analogy that should get your attention. Current AI memory is like a GPT-2 compared to what's coming. Think about what that means. GPT-2 was impressive when it launched. It could write coherent paragraphs, generate code snippets, etc. But compared to GPT-4 or 5, it's almost laughably primitive. And this is the Neuron saying this, not Sam. The gap between 2 and current models would be enormous. And I agree with that. If Sam is correct in saying that memory is at a GPT-2 era, then that leaves a lot of runway for future advancements of this in 2026 and beyond. So this is what they're saying. Again, I don't think this is specifically Sam, but this is what the neuron is saying what perfect memory looks like. So let's see if we agree with this. Remembers every word you've ever said to it. I mean, that's maybe perfect memory. I don't want that. Has read every email you've written, every document you've created. Knows your small preferences you didn't even think to indicate. I mean, yes, that's sort of that back end, right? Personalized across every detail of your entire life. Ugh. Yes, I guess if I agree to it. Tracks changes in your preferences over time. That's important. Understands context from years ago without you having to remind it. Yes, also would be important. So, what do you guys think here? I mean, obviously, there's not a whole lot more from Sam. It doesn't look like. I'm just looking for quotes here. Here he says, Sam says this might not be a 2026 thing, but it's one of the parts of this that I'm most excited for, end quote. And then it goes on to have a couple more things about it. But I'm just curious on that part alone, because there's many here. What's your guys' thought on memory and maybe where this is going to go? Not just ChatGPT, but Gemini or even Copilot. Let's say 2026.
All right. So this boggles my mind that you could even contemplate personalization with continuous and retrospective memory of everything you've done for billions of users in the same model. The model isn't capturing all of that history and all of that context. It has to be fed that context at the time of inference. And so there's enormous storage question here. Where does all of that context get distilled and retained for me as an individual user? And then what's the cost of injecting that in at the time of inference when, hey, I'm not looking for a ton of personalization when I'm doing an immediate short query. Is ChatGPT going to feed the model all of that? Remember that all of this is happening simultaneously across many, many instances of the model, right? So, if you're on the East Coast, you're hitting a different data center than I am, right? That's running the models that we're talking to. Okay, but then there has to be transfer of all of that information. If I happen to travel to the East Coast and I'm talking to a different server, there's an account that they're going to keep, which is going to keep all of that context about my past history. And so I'm like, does this even make any economic sense? I understand that it makes sense to me, like to have a very articulate and well-informed personal assistant, but I think of that as being something that ought to be architecturally done at the local level, not at the sort of the cloud level, because I just don't see the compute economics working there.
Yeah, I would say also that that for me, I want a little more persona on me, right? Which would go into the compute economics, because I don't need you to know that I have this whole paper mache sculpture life when I'm talking about AI consulting.
Right.
Like, yes, there is an element of creativity that goes in both, but don't come at me with, well, as a paper mache sculpture, clearly you blah, 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 blah. Like, no, understand that there are different facets of my life. And I know some people use projects for those, but I want then multi-level, right? I want a project as an AI consultant for each client. I don't like my vegetables to touch my,
Mashed
I don't
potatoes.
know, my fruit, mashed potatoes. Like I'm not into it. And you can code this yourself, right? You could create different interfaces that had those kinds of context documents. But if they're going to go and like really emphasize memory, I feel like they need to understand more about what memory should be overarching, what memories should be somewhat categorized, and then what memories are specific for one particular project, one particular client.
So let me just say that at the architectural level, retrieval augmented generation is a solution to the question of whether when you go and Beth, you ask it about, some specific topic, it needs to bring in all of that context. But it has to at least do the query against the vector database that is growing for each individual user to figure out what to pull back and whether or not to pull something back from the history, right? It's from the memory about everything that you've done. So there are ways to make it more efficient, but again, I'm looking for someone to explain to me, somebody at the vanguard of building memory for AI models. Tell me how that works at the personalization level for billions of users.
There's also this piece of the longevity of your relationship with the AI, right? So for a while, ChatGPT was not understanding that I do not want to be responded to in full sentences, right? If I've asked you for a summarization, give me bulleted phrases. So over a series of months, I was increasingly more vehement. And when 5 came out, it only did like everything. I could ask for anything, and it was like, here's 25 bulleted phrases, Beth, because that's the only thing you want from me. So there's also this piece of memory, and then how well it follows instructions, the ways that it integrates that aren't at the time that you're talking about memory, but are at the time when something new is coming out. And it's great if you remember all these things, but it's not great if you update every 6 weeks and I need to spend 45 minutes, an hour trying to figure out what that update did to how you're responding to me. I mean, that's just not workable for me.
And I think you guys are both pointing out two definite sides of this bigger concept of what do we want with memory, and also why I 100% believe it's at the GPT-2 level right now. I agree with that. I think we see a little bit of magic and smoke and mirrors with memory right now, but I don't think it's going to touch obviously what's coming. Now, how do you fix the RAG system? How do you fix the just-in-time memory? How do you fix deleting memory that should be deleted? If I don't have perfect memory or perfect recall, but I've certainly seen, there's a famous actress who has it, but there's many people, or I suppose a small set of people who have essentially what we would consider to be perfect recall. Either they can tell you the day, the smell, the color, right? They're really, really good at it. And when you talk to them about that, they do not talk about it as a superpower. They talk about it as something that's pretty annoying. It's not great to not remember, not forget in that case. It's a lot going on. You can imagine that would be somewhat or feel a little bit debilitating. And I feel the same way with AI. If you just throw everything at the wall, it's actually going to be, to your point, Beth, more debilitating. And to your point, Andy, way too expensive, realistically. That doesn't make sense. So it's complex to say that that's like the least of it, right? Because what we really want with memory is the ability to have just in time, always relevant, forget the stuff that probably doesn't matter because it was a one-off, and also treat it more like a brain would, where if it's something that I start to do over and over again, after 28 days, it might become a habit, right? That's something that you hear a lot. Like, oh, it takes 28 days for whatever reason to really get a habit. If I really, really want to get back into lifting weights, it's going to take a little bit for my brain to get in that process of, this is what we do. It's going to rebuild some probably neurons in there and connectors and say, this is Brian right now. And maybe some of that other stuff and is, doesn't matter as much, right? At the current sense. And that's really, really complex to try to mimic something like memory when it comes to the human brain, both for the full recall, but also the selective forgetting. And I had a conundrum on this a couple probably months ago, which is the idea that do we want that? Is that good for culture in general? Societies, is it great to just go beyond a step above the human? And the conundrum was basically like, there's a lot to be said for selectively and agreeing to forgetting about some things in history. Now, don't come at me as far as the big things in history. I'm not talking about that. But if you really dig into it with cultures and the way different cultures and places work, even within cultures and societies, there's sometimes an acceptance to say, well, that was then and this is now. And I do not need that to be brought up in every single conversation now. And there's many, 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 many use cases like that we could point to in the world that would say that's kind of the way we kind of operate. Then you go and say like, well, what if at the human level, at the personal level, we have total recall? Do you even go one level above that? Do you want that across societies and stuff? And it's an interesting conundrum because there's a lot to be said that, ooh, is that what it means? Because I don't know that I personally want that to be in my AI every single day. And that to be confronted with that total recall of something that was maybe even on the personal level, well, frankly, just the older, dumber, idiotic Brian from his 20s. Do I want that in my responses as AI today? If I use ChatGPT for the next 20 years, do I want it to be like, hey, Brian, remember when you were 47, you said that super dumb thing? Like, we're bringing that up again. It's like, well, I'm not sure how relevant that is, but thanks. Appreciate it. Didn't need to bring that back up, So it's just infinitely complex. I do not know how they're going to solve for this. I think it's very interesting. It's probably the area I'm the most interested in figuring out how the geniuses of the world right now go about figuring this out. And the one thing the neuron points on, just to sort of put a bow on this memory conversation, so we can move on, is this also means you are probably going to, just like Karl has already talked about, you are probably going to get with and stay with one of the major players, because 7 or 8 or 9 years of good ChatGPT memory is going to be hard for me to jump over to a Gemini or whatever the product is of the day 7 years from now. If ChatGPT has a really good memory and is assisting me at the level you're expecting, Beth, like, can I just move? Can I take that with me? Or is that proprietary with inside the way they work it? Could I even download my data and move it over to Gemini and get a similar response if I could even upload that data? Or is it much, much more complex than that, and how all that data is connected on the ChatGPT side that truly makes that memory valuable to me, not literally the terabytes of data that I could theoretically move from one product to the next. And so it's going to make people stay with these products. I mean, it is.
What you just said was proprietary, and that hit me. Like, is there a possibility that my memories, my information, my interaction becomes proprietary information in the system that I was using and I can't get it back out? Right? You remember when you couldn't get your x-rays from the doctor? They're like, we took those pictures. Right. And it's like, no, that's me. I paid for it. Come on.
I think the point is, Beth, just my guess here is it's not your raw data. I bet you will still own and have privacy rights to the raw data, but that's not the same thing as saying ChatGPT has built 7 years worth of connectors that are just tuned right to Beth, and you can't get those. Those are proprietary. So could you download your data set like I can do on Facebook or LinkedIn and get all my conversations? Yeah, but is that actually going to be the same thing as moving a memory? No, not even probably close. And it wouldn't be in the best interest of OpenAI or Gemini or any of them to do that for you. It just wouldn't, because it's not sticky for them. So lots and lots here. But please go on to other news stories. And stuff.
I'll move on. But I just want to say that I am motivated now to start working toward having a local high, reasoning model on my machine, and start to work through that. It doesn't mean I can't access the cloud. That one can access the cloud, but I want to start working there and developing memory around that one. And I'm not sure that they've built that feature yet, but let's look forward to that. So moving on to news, we're talking about customized, personalized assistants, AI assistants out there. And Amazon has just launched a web-based Alexa Plus. Okay, and they're challenging ChatGPT's preeminence out there as the AI assistant of choice. And Alexa has a lot of installed base in many, many homes. And if it got to the level of ChatGPT in terms of its proficiency and competence, then many, many households would end up using Alexa as their primary personal assistant. So they're making a play for that. And, it plays into this conversation around memory is, what does Alexa actually remember about what you order, what you ask for, what happens in your home. It's listening all the time, right? It's like what do they call rewind or limitless kind of functionality. Now, limitless was purchased by Meta, but Alexa and Siri have a seat in the homes already. And ChatGPT is primarily being accessed through desktop and mobile device, whereas there are listening systems inside households. And so this is the first splash that Amazon's making toward an AI assistant in the home.
Yay.
Yeah.
I feel
There's an upside and a downside to it for sure. Although I would like to have a really good, a home-based assistant for my family. I mean, I have access to, and experience to use AI very proficiently, but it would be really good if those tools could start to become available just by saying, Alexa.
Yeah.
No, I don't have Alexa here.
I do.
No, but mine's about.
Yeah. I do have Alexa Plus, and Andy, what I will tell you is just at a rudimentary level. I know, Beth, you've had less great experiences with it, but I really, really like it. And here's the main reason is I can just email it a document or send it directly from the app, and it becomes part of a RAG system. And then Alexa has full access to that. So I have uploaded family schedules. I've uploaded my daughter's day in and day outs at school. And when she gets home at 12, she's in finals this week. So it's nuts. This whole week is nuts. And at any given time, because that information is with one simple email in or from directly from the app, which admittedly isn't the easiest way to do it, but it's fine for now. I get it. I can just simply be in the kitchen and ask all sorts of questions. My goal in 2026 is to feed it with all sorts of product documents for like things around the house. So if I need to know schedules and stuff like that. Yeah, because then what I want to be able to very quickly do, and I will even go farther than that, when I go to put the Christmas decorations this year, it's already in my brain to organize that correctly, because I want to be able to say to Alexa, like, where did I put the upstairs Christmas lights? And it goes, well, it's in bin number 4, Brian, you labeled it. And I'm like, perfect, because that's in my garage. And next year, I'm going to want to know these things. Every year, I'm annoyed that I didn't do a better job at the end of the last year of organizing my stuff. And this will just be one extra way that I'll be able to use a home-based AI to help me with that stuff. So I personally
configuration question. So before the advent of the web-based Alexa Plus, how were you getting to Alexa Plus? Is it a mobile app that you're talking about, or is it on Alexa?
It's on Alexa.
It is. So they released Alexa Plus through their home-based interfaces already. Yeah.
Yes. I had to do one device. I had to update one device, but then it made it available to all devices except one really old, my first original, like version 1 Echo, the big tall ones. It does not work on that first model. Every other model, the dots and things that I bought over the years, they do all actually work with Alexa Plus, and then it also works directly through the app. So that's how I ended up with it. And
have you started to use Alexa Plus as you do in the home for things like, we were just having a conversation about X. Give us all the background and briefing on that, and it'll speak back. Okay, great.
All the time, because it's now it's like talking to ChatGPT or Gemini or any of those, because it's listening for the follow-up. So it's just like using voice mode, which is great, because when you do have a quick question, or my daughter asks a random like historical question, you're like, oof, you can just have that really quick conversation with follow-ups to it. The use case I'll give you really quick on this one was my nephew was accepted to a college, and it was a college that was in the DC area, and I just didn't know that much about it. And I was making lunch one day and had an entire conversation in the kitchen while I was making lunch doing nothing else to learn about the programs that they had studied for, because I knew what my nephew was into. And I just was able to learn like for 3 minutes straight, like a highly tailored podcast on that university. And I thought, well, to me, that's very useful. Like that's how I kind of operate. So to me, that was great to be able to do that.
Well, I think as a new Christmas present for my household is going to be an Alexa Echo.
Yeah.
Clearly, I haven't told Alexa enough about me because after my entire Amazon history, it knows that I like pistachios. Like every 3 days. Are you out of pistachios? Would you like to order more pistachios? Beth, I'm like, how is it? How is that what you have learned about me?
That's the funniest thing I've heard. I'm so glad you said that, Beth. By the way, Karl is here too. Hey, Karl, I know you joined while we were talking on this one or whatever. We're still kind of in the news. We've talked about memory from ChatGPT, and now we've talked about one extra thing with Amazon. And well, frankly, we're 25 minutes in, and we haven't moved past that. So, if anybody else has news stories to share, please do.
Well, we started on the interview with Sam and Alex. Sam
Yes.
Altman, don't know Alex's last name. Karl, I'm curious what you think about that, if you have heard it or.
The
Can't
one
you
on
wait?
the big technology podcast.
Yes, see, I
Yes.
knew.
See,
We said you would know.
Karl, no.
Yeah, who is that guy? We
Yeah.
wanted to know.
So, have you listened to the entire piece?
No,
already?
no.
No.
We were going through the Neuron put together a really good TLDR of it, and I was referring to that.
Yeah, there's a 2-minute segment in there that really, because I've been writing and posting about it for about 6-7 months, and I think where he says it in about a 2-3 minute bit, and I want to play it because I think it's like, if what he's saying usually is where the path that they're going to try to go. And so I'm curious what that means. And it may be slower, but I actually agree with where this is going because I think they're banking pretty much on it. So I was going to play the little clip there, which I thought was really neat. Okay. I think it's that one. Okay.
I think Google is still a huge threat. Extremely powerful company. If Google had really decided to take us seriously in 2023, let's say, we would have been in a really bad place. I think they would have just been able to smash us. But their AI effort at the time was kind of going in not quite the right direction. Product-wise, they didn't, they had their own code red at one point, but they didn't take it that seriously.
Everyone's doing code reds out here. Yeah.
And also Google has probably the greatest business model in the whole tech industry. And I think they will be slow to give that up. But bolting AI into web search, I may be wrong, maybe like drinking the Kool-Aid here. I don't think that'll work as well as reimagining the whole. This is actually a broader trend I think is interesting. Bolting AI onto the existing way of doing things, I don't think is going to work well as redesigning stuff in this sort of like AI first world. Is part of why we wanted to do the consumer devices in the first place, but it applies at many other levels. If you stick AI into a messaging app that's doing a nice job summarizing your messages and drafting responses for you, that is definitely a little better. But I don't think that's the end state. That is not the idea of you have this like really smart AI that is like acting as your agent, talking to everybody else's agent and figuring out when to bother you, when not to bother you, and how to, what decisions it can handle and when it needs to ask you. So similar things for search, similar things for like productivity suites. I suspect it always takes longer than you think, but I suspect we will see new products in the major categories that are just totally built around AI rather than bolting AI in. And I think this is a weakness of Google's, even though they have this huge distribution advantage.
Yeah. So that that I took that out of everything there was to me the most important piece because whether it now it depends on how long it takes or if it goes there at all, because I'm thinking right now that's what we're from a business side, that's the frustration with a lot of people and a lot of companies is that you could bolt on AI and yes you'll get the productivity gains, but I'm like, but then what, right? Because you're like, okay, what are we going to do now? So and what he's talking about, and which I was looking at, so take Excel. You have Copilot, even you have Claude for Excel. Fantastic, it does work. But then it's like, well, if you want to reimagine how Excel wants to work, and he was talking about it earlier, is like, wouldn't you just rather give your AI what you want it to do and let it do it, and then do something else, and then have it come back. And so there probably requires a little bit of transition to get there, but I'm seeing it over and over and over and over. Companies are having a very difficult time adjusting their entire process to it. And so I always have said a native AI company has all the leverage and advantage over a legacy company because they don't need to bolt anything on. They're redefining a whole process and operation. So what he's talking about is like I think like a little bit before, a little bit after, he was talking about how he's disappointed that ChatGPT is still in that chat type interface. He thought it would change by now. So I think it's obviously taking us a lot longer to go through and making that change. But I also think we're still not looking at AI truly as what it is. It's more of like looking at it from the lens of our everyday work. So it's like, oh, how can I add AI to this? How can I add AI to this? Versus how can I rebuild this entire thing with AI? Very, very difficult to do when you've got years and decades of built up usage and products and everything has been built around that. So it would be interesting to see when that new stuff comes on, because it goes back to he had a previous interview with Noam, I forgot his last name, talking about steam engine, talking about electricity, where it took a while for people to build around electricity, not steam engine, where people tried to add electricity to it, to the system already for a steam engine, and it didn't work. But only until you actually built the entire thing for electricity that would work. I think we're in the same spot. We're trying to add AI to stuff that's essentially built for people. So how can you rebuild everything for AI?
Yeah, I have an example of this in just the recent days that I've been working with AI, and I want to show Greg's comment here. It's about Excel. It's like, we're trying to get AI, whether Claude Excel or others, to work in Excel. Why? Why work in Excel? And so the example that I wanted to provide is I've been working on a pretty complex, financial planning spreadsheet. That was the way I started the process with the AI, and I'm using multiple AIs. I'm actually trying to compare GPT 5.2 to Claude with Excel to Gemini and see what each one of them does with this. And so I'm working with ChatGPT 5.2, and it showed me that, okay, I said, well, I need the spreadsheet to do more scenario what ifs, capability that's more flexible, et cetera. And it came back to me and it said, well, I can build that spreadsheet for you, but I will use a custom Python script every time you ask me for a different scenario, because it's just easier for me and it's more direct and it's going to be more accurate. Then, maybe there's mistakes in the spreadsheet and there's, insufficiencies in the connections and so on. And I'm like, why am I building it as a spreadsheet? And what's happening is that this tool that I'm building is going to come about to be something that I just do this financial, projection and planning process with, just in dialogue with the agent, not getting the spreadsheet out and making changes myself, even though it did a really great job building that spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is in effect discardable in this process. And so I was trying to bolt on AI to something that was familiar for me, which was a spreadsheet, when in fact, if I gave it all the necessary context for the inquiries that I wanted to make, it's going to run on demand custom Python to do it.
My response is, go ahead, Beth, first. I just have a thought.
And we may be thinking similar thoughts. That then takes a different attention, a different knowledge set to be able to understand what's happening. One of the reasons that we go to spreadsheets is because we can see the numbers. And if we can see that those numbers don't add up, there is something wrong. If I'm looking in Python, and I'm starting to be able to sort of read Python, but I don't read Python the way I read numbers in cells, right? And I respect people who are laughing at this point because some people don't read numbers in cells, even though they're right there. But it, like, when you switched from the steam engine to the electricity, you needed different tools and different understanding in order to understand and evaluate the effectiveness of what was happening. So I think we're in a gap. What were you thinking, Brian?
Not that, but I love that thought too. And also, Greg says this could be the greatest episode ever. So there you go. We did it. It took us 620 episodes, but this is the greatest episode ever of the Daily AI Show. Good night, folks. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. Greg is awesome and always thoughtful and always sharing ideas. And yes, I want to give credit where credit's due. Greg has been saying for a long time, it's not the bolt-on, think farther than that. It's just about using AI and using tools in AI, not the other way around. So I want to give credit to credit. Thank you, Greg. And yes, we've seen those comments in there. Now, what I was going to say was actually a little bit of a pushback. We haven't used that term in a while, but I have a bit of a pushback. Yeah, I know from the old days. Makes me think of Robert.
Robert. That's the first thing I always think of when someone says pushback. It's
Robert. Yeah.
It's only Robert.
And only our OG viewers and listeners
know
probably know
who
who Robert is. So go back, watch the first week of episodes, or maybe don't do that.
No, do not do that. Don't do that.
We were talking about ChatGPT. I swear to God.
Okay, so what I was going to say is, number one, I have a couple things here really quick. Number one, what else is Greg going to say? So I always try to think to myself, hold on a second, why is he saying this? OpenAI is not the small, nimble Sprite startup anymore. They're not. They're big. They may not be as big as a Google or a Microsoft, but they're not small and Sprite. So if that is going to happen, I actually don't even think OpenAI is going to be the company to do it. I think it's going to be a company that comes out of nowhere and they build a truly ground up sort of AI. Number two, what else is he going to say? In terms of competition and what Google is doing, he could say, I don't think Google's doing this right. They're adding Gemini to their docs and stuff like that. And I think, dude, I would not be counting Gemini or Google out on what they're able to do. They're pretty good at showing how they can adjust and on the fly. So are they building, truly from AI up and thinking about it? Yeah, probably. I imagine that's going somewhere in the skunk works and the deep minds and stuff like that of what they do at Google. For sure, I think that's happening. But also, you have to meet the user where they are. And users are in spreadsheets. Users are in docs. Users, we're in our Gmails and emails. And I agree with you, Andy. That might not be the case long term. But there's this whole EV hybrid situation we got going on as an analogy that says, do I think we will all ultimately have more EVs on the road than gas cars? Yes, 1,000%. I think it's going that way. You can claim to me about, I think Greg actually was saying the other day about EV sales are down, 100% agree and all that, because we probably should have done this whole hybrid thing for a really, really long time. And, we did. Right. So, Greg, what else Greg is going to say, but he meant to say Sam. What did I say that? Brian said, what else is Greg going to say?
No,
but
he's mentioning you said.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Gareth. I said Greg, I meant Sam Altman when I was saying that. What else is Sam going to say? Thank you if I misspoke there. So look, number one, what else is Sam going to say? He's got to speak to these future investors. He's got to speak, and you have to, he is a CEO. And I know it's fun to think of him as being on these podcasts and it's just Sam Altman and this is what we're doing. And that's because that's sort of the role he played. He's very good at having a, not abrasive sort of sit back. And this is where we are in AI. But the reality is he is a big CEO of a big company and he has responsibilities to investors and future IPOs and all the things. And of course he's going to say, I think these legacy people that are my competitors are doing this the wrong way. I think we have a faster, more nimble way to do it. We're building from AI up. And I go, yeah, maybe. But also, I think there's some unknown out there right now who's really thinking about this with a team of 5, and they're super nimble and they're super efficient, and they're going to do what you're projecting, Karl, and they're going to come out of nowhere. And we're going to say, where did these come from? Holy crap. They're not using spreadsheets or docs or whatever and enter the tool at all. They're just AI.
Well, my pushback on that is that, there's a certain level of scale and potential and power that's created by the market innovators, and OpenAI is clearly one of those. There, a small startup that produces something that's so compelling that it has the potential to challenge one of the major players is going to be snatched up by one of them. Let's not forget that Sam Altman is probably one of the most wealthy people on the planet. Right? He's among the billionaire class of people who are driving these things, and they have the potential to exercise certain levels of control over the incursion of even the most, unexpected and innovative entries into the market.
I think it's less about who does it. It's more about how fast we got to get there, or we're going to get there. Because right now, report after report, it's like the adoption is slow, or there's people adopting, but they're not getting things out of it. And the way that products are built, like a Microsoft Copilot, is designed to be inside, but it doesn't work. Like it kind of works, but it kind of doesn't. And you have to know all the features. And even with Excel for Claude, right? Like it works, but like the question is that how we're going to get there? I think though, when we talk about EVs, we just never had the infrastructure. Like if you replaced all the gas stations with electric, right? Or at least half of them, you're probably going to see more EVs on the road. Also, the tech isn't really there. Like if we had 1,000 kilometers and you're running that changes the whole. I was like, yeah, 1,000 kilometers on like one charge, that's ridiculous. So, and I'm curious to see, I don't know. Is our tech, is everything that we've seen so far, is that enough to do the work that we don't know what's coming yet, right? Because it's very fascinating what people actually do for work, like work. When we see it, when we go into these meetings, and there's like 40%, I would say 35-40% of work of like actual business sustaining, like great work. But then I see like 60%, 65% of like, man, that sucks. Like why? Like it's just churn, like stuff that you just have to do because it's just part of it. So yeah, people are using AI to get rid of that 60, but I'm like, I'm curious. And that's why kind of when he talked about redefining a whole bunch of stuff, whether Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, how are we redefining it? Like what does the redefinition of this company or redefinition of this company mean? But the thing is, and I'm still, we'll see. I think we'll see this within a year. Is all those potentially AI native companies, how their impact on those industries they get into? That is the big tell.
Mm-hmm.
How fast these companies will adapt, right? Because I'm like, there's a lot of companies that we're working with. It's a slow. We're doing the custom GPT. It's just really, takes time. But I'm curious, and I'm starting to see bits of it. It's like these AI companies are in that industry. I don't know how they'll do, and I don't know how the market will impact them. But that's what we kind of FOMO our clients and be like, hey, you have a year, next quarter, these AI native companies are coming in your industry. They have all leverage, all advantage of AI and agents and everything doing, and they can pivot faster than you can. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do about it? And that is kind of like the FOMO that we put in, that we instill. Yeah. That's the thing. How they'll do, I have no clue. Can a traditional legacy business compete against an AI native business? In my mind, 60% of the time, no, because you'll get bogged down in your your process just because of stuff, versus a native says, I don't need any of that, we'll go. I could be wrong, but kind of my thinking.
I think you're right, first of all. But here's an example, and I'm bullish on this. In fact, I probably need to buy stock. I'm not giving stock advice. I'm the worst. I would be the worst.
We got to preface that with like, not financial planners. Do not.
Yeah, no, please. Here's what I think, though. Just my personal opinion. People can push, and I'm sure people have opinions on that. Jim Farley, he's the CEO of Ford. He last year went over to China and was literally humbled, said so, by BYD, right? He was like, "Ooh, we are not doing what we need to do at Ford if we want to be competitive in the EV market." What is he doing? He is literally figuring out, and he was on a meeting, on a podcast, whatever, he was on an interview recently, where he's like, "Oh, we have this plant and we're doing the BYD thing. We've already figured out all the sourcing. We figured out the thing, and that is what we're doing. And we have this plan or whatever." Now, there is a legacy company, if there ever was. Here's a company that literally invented the whatchamacallit, for
production line.
Thank you, the production line. Jesus, Brian. I hate when I just lose the easy words. The production line. Thank you, Andy, for saving me. His grandfather worked at Henry Ford's River Rouge plant. It says in 1918. I was looking up because I want to make sure I said his name right. Anyway, there is a legacy company of all legacy companies who has had some missteps with the Mach-E and things that they've done. And there's people who have all sorts of opinions about whether Ford will ever be competitive in the hybrid or EV market or otherwise. But I think when you look at companies like that, Karl, your 60-40 split, these are companies that could potentially be in that 40 percentage of making it work, because somebody at the top has looked and said, you know what, I've been to China and we cannot compete if this is what our plan is. Time to do something different. And then it's about, do they have the resources in the pockets, the deep pockets, to go pull that off, go build a brand new plant with all the think about all the connections Ford has to manufacturers and things like that. So we'll see. But I just wanted to use that as one example of probably many, many of where this, could work.
The one thing, though, that there's a challenge, and we work with quite a lot of the CEOs who are very like, we got to go. The only thing that prevents them, and you can see the disappointment on their face, is how their business has been built, how the operations, and how even if they order people to do it, they can't unravel it. And we're seeing it too. And like, no, you've got to, outside of you starting another company and shadowing your own company, this is how long it's going to take, just because you look at all those SOPs, you look at all the processes, and it's like, you have essentially created, use this term very loosely, your own prison, because you can't unravel some of this stuff. You can order people to do it, but it impacts your bottom line. And to really unravel this stuff, it's very difficult for you to do so. Some people have either the fortitude to do it and then the risk to do it, but very few, they're like, you know what, I like my revenue. So it's like a kind of like, should I do it? I feel like it's right, but I'm also making this money and it's keeping everyone employed and blah, blah, blah. Like all those reasons, you have to make a decision, and that's really tough. And then the decision usually is, let's straddle the line, but straddling the line isn't really the best outcome, because you're just in the session bolting on, right? And I see it sometimes, and it's like, and it's not anyone's fault, because that's how businesses, and that's how we all build businesses, all these operate, like, it's just part of it. And it's very, very tough to unravel it, because you're like, oh, that is instructive.
So let me take this back to the Ford example. So, Ford probably correctly said, okay, let's take the Ford F-150, the number one selling vehicle that we have, and let's put a battery and electric motor in it, and we'll have our EV. And they launched that, and they were in effect bolting on the new technology to what the existing platform was. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the standard pickup platform is going to survive, for some time. But when he went to see BYD, he saw other things, and I'm not sure what those other things were exactly, but they saw, not only the manufacturing process, which is entirely robotic, right? The BYD assembly system is entirely robotic. There are very, very few humans involved in it all. And then on top of that, they have started from a pure, let's invent what a vehicle should be with, all of the latest technologies, start as a starting point. And so he's resetting, and they've canceled the Lightning program, which is, you can no longer buy the Ford F-150 Lightning going forward because they've stopped that. But this is the first I've heard that they're going to go out and do something new. And I don't think it's going to be a pickup, right? It's going to be something along the lines of the more generally applicable, sedan type thing that BYD specializes in.
So to go back to what all of you are talking about, but what Karl was talking about in terms of, if we replaced all the gas stations with charging stations, would that create a demand or a faster change? But if we ask, there's a facilitation structure called 9 Whys, where you say, like, what do you want? Why is that important to you? And why does that matter? And why is that important to you? And you go through your 9 Whys. And if you do that, you get down to the deep reason of why something needs to happen. There is, I don't know if you know this, Brian, but a pilot project on State Road 516 to debut in 2027 that will charge EVs at highway speeds by driving.
I've seen those before, yeah.
Because now we're moving. Why would we stop and charge or put gas in a car if that's not something we have to do, right?
Yeah.
And there are other interventions. There are other innovations like smaller, lighter batteries, right? There, so that you can get chargers all over the place. But that would be a infrastructure like revolution. You don't have to stop anymore. And what does that mean, right? Like, there's so much that happens at the places where you stop and get gas.
Yeah. And also, like, here's the thing. You could put me in a car tomorrow that could take me all the way to 3 states north of me, to you, Beth. I could drive, let's say you put me in an EV tomorrow that could take me all the way to your house. Is that realistic? No, of course not. My wife and I are going to swap driving. We're going to get out and stretch our legs. We're going to get food. That is part of the experience of it. So I initially thought, and this is not to get into EV conversation, I initially thought what I wanted with my EVs were longer batteries, larger batteries, or batteries capable of taking me for longer drives. And I actually realized, as being an EV owner and taking EVs on long drives, that's not actually what I want at all. I just want fast charging. I don't actually mind, like, 300 miles range with a 10-minute or less fast charge, or to your point, contactless charging, maybe on highways down the road or something like that, where I'm in the left lane and that's an EV charging lane and it's literally charging my battery, like through mag. Sure. But the reality is, like, having a car that can do 1,000 miles to me actually isn't the solution. It's a nicety, I guess, to not have to recharge or whatever. But if I'm thinking about the road trips and how I actually already operate, it's actually, 300 to 350 miles consistently is plenty. And all I want to know is, do I have to not spend 45 minutes waiting to get back in the car? Because that's what actually bothers me. That's what extends what would be a drive typically to Georgia. When we did that Georgia trip in the Bolt, which does not charge fast, like a year or two ago, it took a 7-hour ride and made it a 10-hour ride. That's what I'm actually trying to solve for.
Unless we want to continue on the EV side, I have a couple little things we can close up with that are AI related.
Yeah.
One of them is that Elon Musk, in a staff meeting, told his staff that AGI could arrive by this year, 2026. Okay, so that's a little bold, but he has a pattern of overestimating the accomplishments of his company, or they ultimately achieve the things that he sets them on, but not in the short time frames that he's challenging them to meet.
And not all of them. Just some.
Yeah, fair enough. The other little one is that And I don't know whether you guys have seen this yet. I hope you have. But this is about the Anthropic task-oriented interface for Claude AI. So I hadn't heard about this. Maybe it's just that it's been discovered in testing and it hasn't been released out there. But here is something that Anthropic is doing with their Claude interface. They're testing a task-oriented interface that moves beyond conversational chat, has 5 specialized sections, and granular workflow controls that position the AI assistant as an autonomous productivity tool. The new interface, which was discovered December 15th by Testing Catalog, introduces a toggle allowing users to switch between Claude's chat experience, where you have to type into the box or speak to it, and an agent mode that's organized around these distinct task categories: research, analyze, write, build, and do more. Okay, each section appears on the main screen and provides specialized capabilities for different use cases. Very interesting modification to the chat interface that we're so accustomed to, which is pretty much a blank screen with a little dialog box that you enter into. By contrast, GenSpark and Manus have an array of different tools that you can select and a super agent to orchestrate those. This seems like Anthropic is moving more toward that agentic interface where there are defined task flows that are kind of categorized by those ones that I listed, and that you invoke those depending on what you're going to Claude to do.
And not and important that it came after Opus was released, right? Sonnet 4.5 may not have been agentic enough for the ability to like take one of those specific, I suspect their skills, maybe with a little script attached, but one of those and really go, but research, blah, blah, blah. And then Opus 4.5, if you have enough credits, can just go, if you have credits in time, I guess, can just go and come back to you with a mostly fully formed idea, project, script.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to wrap things up if that's okay with y'all, because I have a meeting in 3 minutes. And so I got to run. But let's wrap it up for the week. Look, we're going to be here all next week, or some of us will be here all next week, even though it's a holiday week. Expect to have live shows Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Thank you to everybody in the comments. This was a really, really interesting conversation today. Thank you to Greg and Gareth and everybody in the comments who added to it as well. We'll be back on Monday. Don't forget, we have the Conundrum episode tomorrow. It's about beauty. It's about AI. It's about robots. It's about commoditized beauty. It's a good one. But I say that about every week. So the Conundrum episode comes out tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can find it on the podcast platforms, not on YouTube, but on Spotify or Apple and those kind of places. And then we'll have the newsletter that goes out on Sunday. This is just for anybody that happens to subscribe. This is the last Conundrum and the last newsletter of 2025. I'm taking a much needed break, and I will be back. I think it's around January 11th. So about a 2-week break, and then we'll be back ready to kick 2026 in the butt and get going with all the things. So that's what's going on. Come back, hang out with us over the weekend with the things we have going on, and then obviously all next week. Can't wait to see everybody. Bye, everybody.